It's the Fightful MMA Holy Smokes podcast with Showdown Joe and Sean Ross Sapp. It's the
Welcome to the May 23rd edition of the Holy Smokes MMA podcast with yours truly, Joe Ferraro, and of course, joined as always by managing editor for Fightful, Sean Ross Sapp. Give me a follow if you get a chance at Showdown Joe on social media. Give him a follow at Sean Ross Sapp. So much to discuss based on no UFC event happening over the weekend, but my goodness, was there a lot of stuff that went down in Las Vegas as the UFC had their athlete retreat, aka people are calling it the Fighter Summit because that's what it was before. But a fair amount of stuff did go down, pretty much headlined by Christian Cyborg Santos, Julianne, whatever you want to call her, who's not fighting in her division. She happens to be fighting in the street. She punched out Angela Magana, or sort of sucker punched her, knocked a tooth out, raising a lot of eyebrows and a lot of, there's a battery charge forthcoming. Mr. Sapp, what do you make of this?
It says we're not live, by the way, so that could be an issue. Okay, people say they can see us. Never mind. Nigel, my tech guy, what are you doing? This situation is a very that's like that was my reaction to the whole thing, because I see both sides and I'm like, both sides, here's the long and short of it, both sides are wrong. Both people are wrong. You see a lot of people trying to justify one, justify the other. They're both wrong. They are both absolutely wrong here. Angela Magana made fun of how another person looks, and she got hit for it. She got hit more so for saying that she didn't respect Chris Cyborg, but you can't do that. You can't do that. But at the same time, there's the old adage, Joe, talk shit, get hit.
I concur. Yeah, but go on. Sorry.
I mean, that's just how I feel. I mean, if you're going to put out tweets of that nature, clowning somebody who is, the weight disparity is about 40% of your body weight, you gotta be prepared. You gotta understand. You gotta know what's coming your way. Now, do I advocate it? No. Chris Cyborg should not have done that. She should have been a bigger person. Because, sometimes it boils down to just saying, you know what? You're really mean. And that can do more than what punching somebody in the face could do.
Yeah, but the thing is, I'm conflicted because the old school guy in me, and this goes back to, for anyone that's ever listened to the Fightful MMA podcast with Pearson, Sean Pearson, there's an old adage. I mean, when you're old school, long before there was this social media stuff, I grew up in my childhood and my youth days were basically, don't talk trash about anyone if you can't back it up. Because if you're going to talk trash, you should talk trash regardless, unless you're looking to start a fight. That was just the way it is. Or you're looking to, even if you're playing ball, you're playing hockey, you're playing whatever, you trash talk, look at the scoreboard, that kind of stuff there. But if you want to talk about mano a mano, okay, and you start talking trash to someone via social media, I hate to say it, and maybe I'm wrong, but you should be accountable for what you say. Now, it's not to say that, if you're going to say something bad about someone, you deserve to get sucker punched in the face. But if you're a fighter and you're talking trash about another fighter, you're walking on thin ice. You're balancing on tooth floss. You need to watch out.
Against arguably the baddest woman on the planet, too. When you're Angela Magana struggling to keep a job in the UFC. Now, yeah. The thing is, was Magana in the right to press charges? Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Because
so there's the other side of my argument. We also live in a society where you can't just sucker punch people. These are paid athletes. They're paid to fight. So you need to settle your differences, if you like, inside of a cage or a ring or in the combat circle, square, whatever you want to call it. So no one deserves to be sucker punched in the face. But the old school guy in me is like, well, you know what? You want to talk trash? You want to shoot the shit? All right. What's up? I mean, look at the Diaz brothers. They're not going to tolerate that kind of stuff. It's just the way it is. I mean, the stuff that we can go back with Derek Lewis saying what he said about Ronda Rousey and Travis Brown, that kind of stuff gets people in trouble in real life. So if Derek Lewis wants to say that, I know he took out Travis Brown, but there's problems. And same thing with when people talk about, hey man, if I was you talk about UFC fighters, if they were ever in the Ultimate Fighter, they're like, you know what? If some guy did that to me, I don't care about the show. I'm still a man. You can't talk shit to me like that. So there's a weird double-edged sword here. You don't want to be trash talked because you know what? You're going to pay for it. We're going to fight, but then there's laws, and you can't punch somebody in the face just like that, knock her tooth out. So it's a weird sort of conundrum. You got to follow the law. That's number one. And if you want to make it personal, then you got to pay the repercussions for it. So I kind of feel for Cyborg for wanting to just gain her respect back and, hey, you better respect me sort of thing. But I also feel for Magana, who wasn't expecting it sucker punch, but you can't talk shit.
Yeah, completely. Angela Magana was a completely immature, as she can often be, in regards to Chris Cyborg. Like, you'll hear me criticize Chris Cyborg a lot. I don't give a shit what she looks like. That's not my concern. My concern is her behavior in and out of the cage, and sometimes she's been hard to deal with. Other times she's been really good to deal with. I've literally DM'd her on Twitter, and she's given me quotes for stories before. Then there are other times when me and her go at it on Twitter, but you know what? I'm not out there saying, Chris Cyborg, you're ugly, you look like Jigsaw. And that's what Angela Magana did. And if I were saying something like that, I'm thinking of a fighter who I criticize. Nikita Krylov. I don't say anything about Nikita Krylov that I wouldn't expect to have to answer to his face. If he came up to me and he said, you want to see how quickly I can get out of a Von Flue choke? I would be like, you know what? You probably get out of mine very easily, but you didn't get out of Ovent St. Preux. But you don't criticize somebody like that. And that's a thing, that's a subject that's been tackled before, I mean, in recent weeks, like what's off limits? Well, for the media, we have a certain, there's no mandated code of ethics, but there are ethics. Angela Magana is a fighter. Now, keep in mind, she is at a fighter summit, a fighter retreat, where an allegedly drunk Budweiser speaker is saying, be yourself, but be Conor McGregor.
Jessica Panay's tweet was classic about that one. That was fantastic.
Yeah, and Aljamain Sterling really went in on him too. So the UFC brings these people in, and I wonder if some of these speakers backfired a little bit. I know a few of them did, which we will talk about. But you got Budweiser up there drinking Budweiser, saying, be yourself, but be Conor McGregor. Well, that's kind of what Angela Magana did, but she still shouldn't have done it. And Chris Cyborg absolutely should not have hit Angela Magana. I'll say this, to Angela Magana's credit, she can play the heel, and she does it very well. Like, there are very few people on social media who play the heel better than she does, because, man, people really dislike her and Beck Rawlings. They really do, but
I love Beck Rawlings.
Not a lot of other people. I like playing as her on EA UFC 2 whenever I give that a go, because she is 9 inches taller than everybody else in her division. But yeah, it's one of those things where I'm looking for somebody to be right, but nobody is.
No, you're right. Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. You mentioned the media has a certain. We do, but we don't have a certain code of ethics. I lived by the same rule since day one. I'm not going to sit here, whether I'm on a podcast, whether I'm a subject of an interview on someone else's podcast or radio show or TV show, my own TV show at the time. I would never say anything that I would never be accountable for. In essence, if I talk about anybody from Dana White to George St. Pierre to Frank Trigg to Brock Lesnar to Beck Rawlings in public, I should be accountable when they see me and say, hey, I saw that. Whether it was Ronda Rousey or whether it was John Jones doing what he was doing, I would always curb my emotion and just try and give out the facts and be careful about my opinion, because if they're watching, they're going to question me on it, and I better be able to explain myself without getting into an altercation. So yeah. In that type of situation, I'm a little different than, I would say, more than half of the media out there, because I know, and you can go up and down so many of them in terms of what they say, what they tweet, what they do in terms of talking about fighters and managers and UFC executives or Bellator executives. And then when I see them face to face with them, I'm kind of like, you're a coward, man, because you talked a lot of shit and this person doesn't even know that you did that. You're lucky. Whereas with myself, I can look in the mirror at the end of every day and say, you know what? I didn't talk trash much about anyone. I gave my opinion. But if that person wants to come to me and question me, well, we're going to have a discussion right now. But I would never talk trash in a manner where it's like, I need to watch out and defend myself. Vladimir Matsuchenko, way back in the day, when he was talking about Tito Ortiz, fighting with Tito Ortiz, and he said, look, man, I grew up in a country, in a system where if you're going to talk trash, you better be ready 24/7 because these mothers will come to your door. These mofos will come to your door, knock on your door, and you better be ready to throw down. And that's the way I live my life, because you just never know when you're traveling. When I'm traveling, I go down to Florida to do Titan FC this past weekend. You know, I got to talk about I got fighters complimenting me, DMing me on social media saying thank you very much for everything. I get accused of being politically correct, Sean, when I call fights. I'm just calling the fight. I don't care about this person outside of the cage. I care about what they're doing in the cage and what we did to lead up to this fight here. My personal opinion of them is irrelevant. I might talk about it here. But if I do talk about it here, Sean, and I see them again at the next Titan FC show, I better be accountable for what I said.
100%, and that's a thing that I particularly have to deal with. I'm calling the action for Premier MMA Championship in in Covington this Saturday. I have a funny story about that.
Uh-oh.
So I used to do commentary for Absolute Action MMA, which is a local promotion that has had several UFC stars come from it. And I would always say, guys, hey, you got to send me some information. You got to send me some information. I'll talk to you at the venue, but a lot of times it's hard to get information at a venue, at a regional event, amateurs, things like that. There was this one guy, and I'm sure this will get back to him. He sent me a video, and he was a little unusual, and he said, "Sup, man, here's a video of me. I fight. I break bricks." And I said, "What?" I open up the video, and it is a video of him attempting to break bricks, but failing. He didn't break the bricks. So on commentary, myself and Chris Smith were doing the commentary, and I kind of clowned about it. I was like, this guy, he says he can break bricks, but he didn't. He went in there and he knocked a dude out like with a crazy Vanderlei Vitor barrage in like 12 seconds.
All right.
And I was like, man, I'm going to hear from this guy because his whole camp is like this. They're these just push forward slug. None of them look like they're in good shape, but they never get tired type of guys. And the next time I see him, or the next event, I was like, man, I'm going to have to deal with this. Because not only that, he and my fight team have a bit of a feud. But he comes up to me and he looks at me and he's like, Sean Ross Sapp, that commentary. I loved it, man. So you never know. Also, there's a clip that I may play here on the air where his teammate didn't tell us his name. He wouldn't tell us his last name. And it's spelled Mahoe. What does that sound like? Maho. So throughout this show, Maho is getting choked.
No, I got you. I mean, in terms of commentary, I mean, I had the conversation with a bunch of the fighters at Titan FC, most specifically Kurt Holloway's camp. By the way, Kurt Hollow, now the interim Titan FC lightweight champion, having defeated Jay-Z in a stellar fight. That was fantastic. But we were just talking, and they were asking me questions about other play-by-play guys and guys that I've worked with, or guys that, you know, we're sort of in the same melting pot sort of thing. And I said, look, man, I'm simple. I never listen to myself after a show, but I'm always open to constructive criticism. If you don't like what I say, or you weren't happy with how I said something, or if I said something incorrect, or you want me to say something on the show, I am all ears, man. You call me, you text me, you social media me, whatever you like, just let me know. Because I don't listen to myself. I can't stand listening to my voice. I can't stand listening to anything I've ever done in the past, other than when it's going to be a sit down with a pen and paper, with a talent coach or anything like that to say, okay, here's what you need to work on. Here's your strengths. Here's your coaching opportunities. You need to do this. And Kurt's camp came up to me and they said, you know what? We watched everything you've done when you're calling Kurt's fights. We love what you do. Would you mind saying this? Just be careful when you say this. I said, you know what? That's a fantastic point. And I'll do that 100%. I did it for this fight here. And they were like, we were in line waiting to get paid, Sean. Like the event's over And there's Kurt with his damn phone watching the Titan FC broadcast on UFC Fight Pass after his fight. And I'm like 2 people behind him, and he's looking at me, and he turns the volume up. I'm like, dude, come on, man. I don't want to. I'm trying to talk to some people here, right? He's like, no, man. He goes, you're fantastic. Thank you so much. Jay-Z comes around. He says he watched the fight. He goes, man, you're good. He goes, thank you, thank you, thank you. He goes, I know I lost, but thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm like, guys, I'm doing my thing. So I'm sitting there and I'm kind of like, okay, you know what? And then I did what they asked me to do. And their guy comes around to me. He's like, man, he goes, I've never met a play-by-play guy that would do that. I said, but you gave me good information. You gave me good constructive criticism. I think it works. I only want to get better. I could care less about all the people that were ripping me when I was doing, I don't know, well, I didn't get ripped a lot, but there were a couple of people that are no names, Sean. The people that have like an egg as their avatar on Twitter.
Not anymore. They got rid of the egg. Bring
back
did they? The egg. They got that stupid silhouette now. Bring back the egg.
Yeah, but just people ripping me apart because I had a Canadian accent when I was doing Ryzen fights, and I'm like, whatever. Like, that's just how I talk. I don't have any other accent. This is how I speak. So I'm always up for criticism. But again, I don't put myself in a situation where I'm going to get myself in trouble. Now, you mentioned about dealing with a fighter where you couldn't even get their last name, you couldn't get any information on them. I'll tell you this. At Titan, what I decided to do for this show here, and it helped me out so much, Sean, was when the fighters come in for the weigh-ins, they've got to do this car wash sort of scenario. They got to check in with Daniel K, who's basically the operations guy, to make sure all their information is there, their fight song, their entrance, their blah, 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 blah. And then once they're done with him, they line up in front of me, and I ask them certain questions. I verify everything that I have about them in my notes, and then I ask them some specific questions. Generally, I ask all the fighters the same thing. We know you're a fighter. We know what you do. But what do you do in your spare time? When you're not training, when you're not fighting, I just want to tell a story from the point of when you are announced to when you walk to the cage. I just want a quick story. What do you do? I had one guy tell me he's got 5 different jobs. I had one guy saying he's an auto body painter. He works on classic cars. I had one person saying that they're a manager. They were managing Cody Garbrandt, Dominic Cruz. I'm just kind of, what? What's going on here? I didn't know that. And, little small things like that. Of the 20 fighters that I had to interview that day, Sean, 19 were absolutely gold. Mm-hmm. I had one guy that was just, you can make the argument with someone who goes, that guy's a douchebag. I'm like, he's cutting weight, man. He's having a hard time cutting weight. He doesn't want to sit in front of me for 5 seconds. I'll wait. I don't need it right now. The broadcast is tomorrow. Yeah, but you know what? He was rude to you and his camp was rude to you. They're cutting weight, man. Who cares? I got the story that I needed. We talked about it on the air. We got a good sort of ovation for it. Done. But sometimes people, Sean, are just going to be absolute douches.
Yeah.
But am I going to come on the air and say that?
I got a guy who confronted me, who said, I didn't like what you said in my last fight. I was like, it's not my fault that you held onto a double wrist lock of Kamaru when you were on your back. And the dude stepped over and took an arm bar. That's stuff you learn in the first couple months of defense. Would you have rather me said, oh man, it was a smart move? Or would you have rather me been honest? Because I don't care. It's my job. I got to do it. The bottom line is, I said that knowing that guy might come up and say something. Much different because we're in the media. But Angela Magana, when she tweeted that, she then has to not just assume, but almost expect the person to come to her face. Now, Chris Cyborg doing what she did was not right. That absolutely was not right. It wasn't cool. She should face charges for that because that also hurts the image of MMA. And all these negative and I saw people saying that the UFC wanted this to happen. The UFC didn't want that to happen. That's the most ignorant, there are some ignorant conspiracy theories as it relates to Chris Cyborg. It's just nuts. And then this fighters retreat. I mentioned the Budweiser thing. Then the Kobe Bryant thing. And that's, man, you want to talk about a good speaker to have up there. Glad they put Kobe Bryant up there. But I think it was Leslie Smith that said, how important is a fighters association or an association to what you do? And Kobe Bryant, who is being paid by the UFC, being paid by WME IMG, says it is crucial. It is almost mandatory. We argue, we fight, just like you guys do. But we know that when we argue and we fight about this, it's because each of us has an idea that makes us think that, or that makes each respective one think that this will make the sport better, it will make us better, it will make future generations better. I know, because I've heard from fighters, that the Kobe Bryant thing opened up a few eyes, because you hear Leslie Smith, who's probably making 15 and 15, say, we need an association. That's one thing. You hear Kobe Bryant, who has FU money, saying, we really need an association, and so do you. Well, that maybe makes you look at it a little bit differently. Now, does Conor McGregor want an association? Probably not. It's Joe, we see the same thing in pro wrestling. Do Hulk Hogan, John Cena, The Rock, Brock Lesnar, would they ever want a union or an association? Hell no, they're at the top of the card. Well,
that's the disparity between the top and the bottom, right? It's always been like that. Eventually, if it gets done, you got to pay your union dues, right?
Yeah, you got to have it. I wish MMA media and pro wrestling media had one too. I wish all that stuff. We need associations and things like that. Almost every line of work needs it, down to nurse aides. Like the fact that nurse aides in America don't have an association, and you got people working 16-hour shifts taking care of the elderly when they've been working for 14 straight hours, and we consider that safe. There are a lot of occupations that need this stuff. Now let's talk about the real story from this retreat. The punch machine rankings. Did you see this?
I didn't see them all, but yeah, I saw some of them, yeah.
Patrick Williams, number 1. Come on now. What's up with that? That can't... Suspect.
Who threw spinning back kicks? Was it Uriah Hall and Tisha Torres?
I didn't see that, but...
Yeah. There were some spinning kicks that got measured as well.
Well, I'm surprised that Uriah Halls didn't win, but how about Rashad Evans ranking in the top 10? The old man getting it done.
He can generate power, man. He's always been cool with the feet, cool with the footwork, cool generation of power. When you train with, you continue to train with some of the best, especially with a guy like Henry Hooft, you're going to generate power, man.
Yeah, I was impressed. I was very impressed with that. I'm trying to find the numbers right now. I had tweeted it. I will find them. But I think that's pretty cool that they had one of those there. I was at a local bar a few years ago, and I'm not a big bar guy, Joe. I don't drink. But I watched a guy spend at least $50 in ones on a punch machine.
Oh, my goodness.
At least $50. He had to have been there for an hour.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. And as I'm sitting there watching that, I'm like, okay, there are only 3 options here, Joe. There are only 3 possibilities. Like, he really loves a punch machine and he's bored. 2, he thinks that he's going to impress a girl. Like, some girl's going to be like, oh my God, you're so sexy. How many did you get? 500? You're taking me home tonight. Or he thinks somebody's there to get him. Like there's some old-timey boxing promoter. Hi, kid. Yeah, I think you got what it takes to compete in the big leagues.
It's just silly. 50
We're going to
bucks.
sign
Come on.
you right now. That's... Oh,
The
here
best-
they are. Here are the
best would have been-
rankings.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Patrick Williams, John Tuck, Michael Quinones, David Grant, Mike Perry, no surprise,
That's
Tyron
present.
Woodley, Rashad Evans, Stevie Ray, Arnold Allen, Enrique da Silva, Uriah Hall.
Did everyone do it?
No, there's no way that everybody did
I was going to say, yeah.
But John
Well,
Tuck...
Francis Ngannou did it.
Well, he didn't rank. Your boy didn't rank.
I don't know.
Wuss.
No.
Wuss.
Absolute monster.
Let everybody tweet Francis Ngannou and let them know that Showdown Joe thinks he's a wuss.
Yeah, please don't do that, guys. Don't do that.
And that Showdown Joe said it's no surprise that John Tuck, a 155-pounder, outstruck Francis Ngannou.
Please, under no circumstances should you guys ever listen to anything Sean Ross Sapp ever says. to do about me, please. That's just silly. I don't need to deal with Francis after this. He's a bit of a liability at times.
I know that you were like Arnold Allen's 23 years old. He was a former bantamweight, outpunched Ngannou. No big deal.
I think the classic ending to that story you mentioned about that guy in the bar throwing in $50, $1 bills into that machine was if some female walked right up there and just smashed it one time and beat whatever record he had.
Yeah.
That would be an ego crusher right there. I mean, there's this, I talked to a bunch of peeps about the fighter retreat. Some liked it, some didn't. Some had the light bulb go off in their head, and I was kind of like, that's information that's been available to you since the beginning of your career. But there's a lot of people out there that I didn't say it's not a waste of time because you're in Vegas. You're going to have a good time, right? So no matter what, you're getting flown out to Vegas and whatever. But some of the information that was discussed or shared could have been just sent out via email.
Yeah.
Right?
That's very true. That's very true.
I mean, I saw Pat Barry, who I want to talk to, by the way. I want to connect with him before the podcast started. Pat Barry, if you go on his social media, he's ripping into all this. Like, he's ripping into this fighter athlete retreat in terms of, what may have been leaked out there from what was discussed. And he's about to, he was saying that, we're about to see a lot of a-holes now come out with the UFC, I guess stemming from what the Anheuser-Busch party mentioned. And then, be you, but be Conor McGregor. And, it was, Pat Barry is a guy that wears his heart on his sleeve. He's about as real as it gets. I have an interview somewhere I don't know if it's on this phone, but on another phone of a clip that just kind of warmed my heart when he was just on the stage, being on the dais after an event, and just Pat Barry being Pat Barry. He calls it like it is, and you don't even know if it's like a Diaz brother, man. They don't know that you shouldn't say that or you should say that. They're just real. And Pat's a real guy, and he's taking shots at what was discussed at this retreat in terms of different ways of marketing yourself. Now, we do live in an age, Sean, or an era in MMA, and it's not Conor McGregor that started it, nor is it Chael Sonnen, nor is it Tito Ortiz. You can go back as far as you want to look at combat sport. There's always people that just were so real or that decided to play the heel. And that's unfortunately what's going to sell. How many fighters that we know that are fantastic fighters, amazing fighters? And I can give you a list of, dozens upon dozens upon dozens, but to the mainstream public or to the public in general, they just have no personality. They just can't, the fans cannot resonate with them and could care less about following them on social media or just saying, yeah, you know what, I love when this guy fights or when this girl fights, but I don't know when they're fighting again. They can't resonate. So in a way, I'm kind of happy the UFC brought that out and say, look, man, or girls, guys and girls, you really got to get out there. You got to make some noise.
Here's the thing. I don't think they needed to after the summer kickoff presser. I think everybody got the picture. Michael Chiesa versus Kevin Lee is a real fight that I literally, I wish I had my Charlie Brown Peanuts calendar right here. It is circled on my calendar. Lee versus Chiesa. It's a real thing that I'm like, can't wait for that one. And it's funny because Brock Lesnar is considered one of the more charismatic guys in MMA around that period. In pro wrestling, he has to have a mouthpiece. That should explain. And nobody got the picture after. Well, not nobody, but very few got the picture after Chael Sonnen. Some did, but it seems like since Conor McGregor not only has come along and done the same thing, but made a ton of money and crossed over to the point to where he's like, movie roles? No, I'm good. I don't want to be in your movie. Triple X? Nah, I'm all set. I don't want to do that. Huh. It's funny, man. It's crazy the way it works, but if we get more stuff like that UFC summer kickoff presser, I just keep thinking they can't get any better. I keep thinking that they can't do any better, and with regularity, I'm seeing them out pro wrestling. Because I'm sitting here watching, and I'm like, I wish WWE would do this. I wish WWE would just let people speak, and whether it was a little... Because a lot of those beefs are manufactured. We know they are. But everything's manufactured in WWE, and I just...
I like, you know what? I think you're making a point that most people are missing because, call me old school, but I liked it way better when they were press conferences and not single interviews when you go to media fight week or
That's a good
when it's
point.
fight week and you go to media day and all the fighters, you got 5 on one side, 5 on the other side. You have an hour and a half to get to them all and there's lineups and everybody wants their own exclusive. Everybody wants to get their own story in there and blah, blah, blah. And then you got people that, when they do their interviews, it's 10 and a half minutes long. And you're just kind of trying to get a clip, right? Or a couple of clips here and there. I liked it better when they were on the dais, main event, co-main event, each fighter, and then a couple of other fighters, Dana White in the middle, and we go. Everyone gets sort of the same content, but there's bad blood there, right? Because they're. I mean, I'll never forget when I asked Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir. I said, do you think it's funny that you're being considered a sacrificial lamb? Right, to the UFC and Frank Mir, and people were like, "What the heck?" He even laughed, right? But it was one of those things where it was kind of like everyone heard that, and it was fun. It was a real press conference. I'd rather see press conferences, pre-fight press conference, and full post-fight press conferences. That's what I miss. And the UFC doing this, what they basically got the idea from the Super Bowl. Right, it was the Super Bowl when they were guests at the Super Bowl and promoting some of their events. They had some guests. I think Chuck Liddell was there and stuff like that. That they realized, hey, you know what? You know what they do? What the NFL does on Super Bowl week, they have every fighter stationed and blah, 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 blah. We should do the same thing. And I remember the first time I was like, it's kind of cool. As long as I can get my exclusive. If he's going to get it, I want it. If he's going to get it, I want it. Very simple. But then when you think about it, you know what? I'd rather have them in a press conference format. What do you think?
Or you could just have them at a luncheon and Ally Quinta could slap a plate of food out of Cajun Johnson's hand. And that would work just fine because that's exactly what happened.
Al, Cajun.
That guy. Well, you also talked to Kamaru Usman about this. You wanna go ahead and run that and. So,
yeah, Kamaru. I mean, Kamaru was he was with me doing the play-by-play, and then he had to take off to go to the Fighter Summit. And then I said, you know what, I'll leave you alone after the event. He disappeared. I mean, he just like right in thin air, and he flew out to Vegas. And I said, when you're done, I want to talk to you. And I was lucky enough to catch up with him right before he boarded his flight. So here's Kamaru Usman talking about his time at the athlete retreat. Now, joining me right now is my broadcast partner from Titan FC, Kamaru Usman, who was with me to my right as we did Titan FC 44. And then I don't know if it was just in between a break or something, he informs me, I got to get out of here right away tonight because I got to head over to Vegas for the UFC athlete retreat. I was like, you are going to be tired. So I have to ask you, how did that all go, man? How was the flight and when you landed?
Man, it was kind of a whirlwind. We got done with this show. Incredible fights, by the way. Jose Shorty Torres did an amazing job once again being the champ. But yeah, after those fights, I think I got out of there maybe 12:45, and straight away I drove straight home. It's about an hour and 15-minute drive to my house. Drove straight home. Went already pre-packed a little bit, so went and grabbed my bags. Drove straight to the airport, which was another 30 minutes north. Got to the airport. I didn't sleep, so I could catch my 5 a.m. flight. Caught my flight, stopped in Atlanta, which I hate layovers. Stopped in Atlanta, and then after Atlanta, headed straight to Vegas and got off the plane. Took my stuff, didn't even check in. Went straight to the meetings on Saturday. So, It was a long process, but it was amazing.
It doesn't help that you end up being in Vegas because in Vegas, you're not allowed to sleep in essence. But let me ask you this. Was the athlete retreat, we'll get into the fun stuff in a second, whatever you want to tell, but in terms of the actual athlete retreat, was it worth it?
Yes, definitely. It's amazing. I mean, I think this is the direction that kind of what we, as UFC athletes wanted to see. And they basically, they pulled out all the stops and they kind of reassured us that, hey, we're headed in the right direction. So, yeah, they did an amazing job.
In terms of stuff that you may have learned, what are some of the things that you learned? Is it more of a branding thing? Is it more what to potentially do with your money, training, nutrition? What are some of the things that you took away?
They did all of that, but for me, the main part is branding because I've been educated, quite a bit on how to obviously take care of my money and things like that. But, branding in such a sport that's still relatively new, that's growing, and there's a ton of guys, and so for someone like me being an immigrant from a different country where the sport's not so big, branding and kind of getting my name and the word out there is probably one of the biggest takeaways for me.
In terms of some of the extracurricular activities that kind of break out now on social media, Cyborg has been cited. She's with a battery, like she's going to get charged, or something's going on there for her incident with Angela Magana. I mean, you got 300 fighters. There's booze involved. Something like that potentially could happen. It sucks that it's happening in a division that they're still trying to build. But are you surprised with some of the stuff that you saw while you're down there in this whole Cyborg situation?
Actually, it was actually pretty good. I mean, like you said, booze and 300 fighters, that shit mixed very well, all stuck together on an island like Vegas. But, this actually did not occur. This was kind of middle of the day, there wasn't any drinking and things like that. And, it's kind of bizarre. I mean, it's ridiculous. Charges and having the cops involved. It's ridiculous. I mean, I'm sure the cops came through. Oh, you guys are all fighters, and you called us. Why? I mean, it's ridiculous, but it is what it is. Accidents happen.
It is what it is. Right now, you're at the airport right now, so people that are listening to the audio portion, you can hear a female voice in the back room. Kamaru, or in the background, Kamaru is at the airport ready to take a flight home to go see his little princess, beautiful daughter. Before anything, Kamaru, before we let you go, what is next for you?
Man, fingers crossed. I'm hoping for that big fight. I'm hoping for a fight to, really let the fans know, those casual fans that are still out there, that are still kind of doubting or guessing, oh, where is this guy? Why is this guy there? I'm looking for that fight to really let them know that, hey, I am the real deal. I've pretty much walked through everyone so far. I want to test. I want someone who they think will be a test. Not necessarily do I think it's be a test. I want someone that the fans consider someone that could be a test for me, and so I could really shine and show them that, hey, I'm on a different level than a lot of these guys. So fingers crossed. Hopefully, maybe end of July, August, we'll see what happens.
Well, my fingers are crossed that it is the gentleman you called out, Neil Magny. We just don't know. We have to wait and see how that all unfolds. I do want to, one more thing I do want to ask you, because I know you got to board that flight. There was an awkward incident at Titan FC where I did my best as a professional broadcaster not to laugh my face off or to just sort of react to it. But you are in the cage interviewing, I think the winner was Mike Cargo, if I'm not mistaken. And he continued to say that he's the best welterweight in the world as the person interviewing him is a top 10 welterweight in the UFC. Was that awkward for you? Did you want to say something, or were you like, nah, it's not my time here?
No. At the end of the day, as a competitor, yeah, I mean, it kind of, when you hear something like that, it kind of like, really? Like, I'm standing right next to you. But, at the end of the day, I have to be a professional as well. I was there to work, and, and I commend him for having that self-belief in himself. It's a great thing to have. I think every athlete who wants to be a champion should have that belief. But, at the end of the day, the athlete part of me was like, do you see me standing next to you? but it is what it is. Great performance by him. He did a good job that night.
It's what it is. Listen, my man, thank you. Board the flight. Have yourself a wonderful time. We definitely thank you for taking the time with us. You are the man. I look forward to seeing you. From what I understand, it won't be till August, hopefully sooner, but we do thank you very much.
All right. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Always good to hear from the number 10 welterweight in the world, Joe.
My boy. I'm liking the beard that he had there, because he didn't have that on Friday night. So that's a sign he had a good time in Las Vegas, and he forgot to bring his razor, I think.
Oh, geez. This just came in. This is from Mark Ramondi of MMA Fighting. Tough 26 tryouts going on right now. Some of the names there: Jessica Rose Clark, Rachel Ostovich, Christine Ferreira, who fought Tiffany Van Soest like 3 days ago. Zoila Frosto, Christine Stanley, Sajara Eubanks, Barb Honchak, Lauren Murphy, Roxanne Modafferi. Roxanne Modafferi, a name who, when she was leaving the UFC, I was like, she's done. I don't want to see her fight again. It's amazing what going to a real MMA camp will do for you because her career has transformed. Also, Zoila, that's always an interesting one because you never know what's going to happen, whether it goes to the judges or whether the fight's going to be finished with her. And she's 33 now.
Yeah.
She fought once last year. I mean, she takes these extended breaks. Like, she hasn't fought in almost a year and a half now. She hadn't fought in a while, like between, I think, the Porto and the Leibarger fight. But, I mean, this is a woman, I think she was the first person to beat Fuji, right?
Fuji, yeah.
Yeah. So, she's beaten Panay, Jessica Aguilar, Rosie Sexton back in the day. She was the women's 115-pound champion in Bellator before they completely abandoned that. So Bellator abandoning champions. It's like, come on, like Cole Conrad and Vitaly Minikov and Lombard just dipping.
I don't get that theory, man. I don't.
To me, you want that is something. I don't like that because. Like, it's been over 3 years since they had a heavyweight title fight. What's the deal? What's up with that?
I mean, is Czech Congo, well, I wouldn't say the defunct champion, but, like, what's going on there, man? Like, I mean, that division. Yeah, like...
what a terrible fight that was. What a terrible fight any Czech Congo fight is.
It's crazy how he used to be so exciting, and then this happened.
It's so funny that it's the reverse Rory McDonald. Because Rory McDonald kind of had some of those boring fights, and he's getting a flat fee now.
I don't buy the boring Rory McDonald fights, because I understand that people were always saying, he's
nobody was buying the boring Rory McDonald fights, if you get my drift.
Okay, cool. Who would be calling me? Someone's calling me right now. Like, I'm on the air, peeps. Stop calling me.
I've had like 3 calls.
It drives me nuts. People would criticize Rory because he trains with Faraz and TriStar is boring, and I'm like, what are you watching? Have you ever competed or trained in MMA? Like, you're fighting someone who's trained just as hard as you to knock your block off. You're not going to go there and swing. You're an elite mixed martial artist. So I'm happy the way Rory competes, and this fight here that he had with Paul Daly. I mean, we can get into that whenever you like, but I'm very interested to see what's going to happen with Rory's career. I know that Scott Coker said Bellator is that Rory McDonald is going to help Bellator usher in a new era in Canada, and he'll help them. Blah blah. I'm not buying it. I mean, I don't think Scott Coker truly understands Rory's stock value in Canada.
They got like 2 Canadians on the roster. Like, that's it. They got, like, him and Julia Budd, which, if you want to run an event there, you can say featherweight title fight, is it? Featherweight title fight and a welterweight title fight. That's okay. But you got to fill some other guys out. You need to sign a Sean Pearson, put his name on the marquee.
Well, that's where Sean was originally going to go, was Bellator. He had an offer from Bellator before we got him into the UFC. So,
is he still? Is Sean still under UFC contract?
I believe so. Which means nothing because he's never going to fight again.
Well, I mean, if they offered him Viacom money, he might.
Well, you never know. I'll throw this your way, and guys on the chat, thank you to everyone who's on the live chat right now. We sincerely appreciate it, putting up your comments and giving us your thoughts. But and don't take this as me insulting Rory. I'm just simply looking at it from a Julia Budd versus Rory McDonald perspective. I bet you Julia Budd would sell, or do you think Julia Budd would sell more tickets in her market than Rory McDonald would sell in his market? And what they could do is take Rory and Julia and put that card on in BC, where they're both from.
No, I don't think she would. Nobody knows who she is. No offense. Nobody knows who she is. Even Canadians with their flappy heads.
I'm saying in the local market.
In the local market? Heads. Well, it depends. Where? In BC.
Yeah.
Maybe. But, I mean, Rory McDonald has headlined UFC pay-per-views. Even locally, I think people more so would know who he is. And I don't buy the Canadian renaissance of Bellator like there ever was, like Bellator ever was big there. No. I don't know. And that show the other night,
you know what it is? I'm sorry, Sean. I'm sorry. Like, I've had my differences with Rory. I love the kid. I think he's just an amazing fighter. I don't know what it is. I just wish he would embrace that Canadian psycho role or something. Like just something, because but he's being real. He is who he is. I'm telling you the truth. He is who he is. It just doesn't resonate. And I know he's told me flat out to my face, I want to make that Floyd Mayweather money. I want the same suits as what you're wearing, Joe, and blah, blah. And I'm like, you got to make some noise, dude, because you're a killer.
Yeah.
You're an absolute killer. People love to talk about you as this Canadian psycho, and I think you should run with it. I just wish he would, but now he's a dad and he's just thinking of things differently. I like what he said in his post-fight interview that, there was a lot of things that he had to change. So we'll see where that goes. But, I always wish the best for Rory. I don't care about what happened between him and I wish him the best. But, just wish he could I want the kid to have $1 million in his bank account. I mean, whatever, right?
Do you think he does by now? I think he does by now.
I don't know.
I think he's got $1 million in there by now. After Saturday, I think he does. Or was it Friday? I can't remember. Friday.
Taxes.
Yeah, it's true. But this show in general, I mean, it was kicked off by Baby Slice getting a win. I didn't get to see that fight because I was out. But
he took his opponent down to the ground. I was just like, what? What are you doing?
He's a much more complete fighter than his dad.
Yep.
And I could see that in his first amateur fight. I could see it against a complete scrub. But once I finally get to check that out, I'll speak more on that. But Czech Congo, Augusto Sakai, and I don't know what Bellator wanted, but they got this 26-year-old undefeated fighter in Sakai who beat Alex Huddleston, who I knew they thought very highly of, and went to a draw with Dan Charles. But you get in there with Czech Congo, it's a bore fest. And we had Konstantin Eckner live in London covering this event. And he said that he talked to Sakai after the fight, and Sakai was just like, man, you know what you're getting into whenever you sign the dotted line to fight Czech Congo.
Oh, wow.
And you know it's going to be a boring fight. This is the same guy who fought Pat Barry in one of the best fights I've ever seen.
Oh, the back and forth momentum swings comeback in that fight is it's legendary. But for some reason, I don't know, man. I don't know what it is. Playing it safe, not just pulling the trigger when he has to. It's just weird. Very weird.
Then Linton Vassell over Liam McGeary.
Yeah.
Linton Vassell, man, he's a game dude. Like the only two people that have beaten him since I think 2011 are King Mo and Emmanuel Newton, and that's when Emmanuel Newton was just like beating everybody. And since then, Vassell has beaten him, has returned the favor. I'm down with giving him the winner of the Bellator 180. I mean, he back to back. Newton, Carmont, McGeary.
It's pretty impressive.
Not like the best names in the world, but
for Bellator, yeah.
But for Bellator, that's a hell of a streak. And Liam McGeary has now lost two of his last three. And he wasn't doing that hot against Tito early on. Like Tito was roughing him up a little bit. Do you think we've seen the end of McGeary at the top levels of Bellator's light heavyweight division? He's 34, which a lot of people don't realize.
I don't think so. Not yet. I think he's got one more run left in him. I think he's just got to go back to the drawing board and realize what is going on here and what is causing him to fight in this manner and lose the way he's losing. I think he still has plenty of juice in the tank left. I'm not saying 10 years worth, but he's still got time. I think if he just readjusts things, he should be fine.
Well, I mean, I don't know how many times I asked if your boy Joe Warren was done at the top of any number of Bellator's divisions, but the guy keeps coming back and getting title shots and title opportunities. You got your head in your hands. What's up with that? He gets great gifts from the Japanese. Like, I mean, he's at the top of his game. But yeah, the Bellator light heavyweight division is shaping up kind of nicely. I'm liking that. Because King Mo's always going to be there at heavyweight or light heavyweight or whatever you want him at. The thing that's most interesting, well, outside of this, I don't think they've got another show. They had the Bellator Monster Energy Fight series. I'm sure you were just so pumped for that. Because I didn't realize until I was here on their wiki page. And I am a fan of Monster Energy. Monster, get a hold of your boy. Let's set something up. A couple of years ago, it's funny, I reached out to them, and they're like, well, we're just doing the extreme sports type of thing, but maybe talk to us down the line. Well, hey, now you're in bed with Bellator. Get in bed with Showdown Joe and Sean Ross Sapp. Let's do a little sponsorship. Sean at Fightful.com, by the way. Contact me. But the next Bellator show is over a month away, and you don't see that a lot, Joe.
No, I know. That's very strange, yeah.
And this show is going to be a fun one, and I like what they've done. I really like what they've done. Okay, so it's crafty. It's crafty what they've done. You know how a lot of times Bellator and Strikeforce, the old Coker method of let's put some locals on the show, on the prelims. Well, what they've done for the Bellator.com and the Spike show isn't putting locals on there. They're like, let's just put people with familiar last names on the show. Chinzo Machida, Carrie Ann Melendez, Ryan Couture, Neiman Gracie. And I got to say, I like the idea. I like it. What I would have done if I were them, I would have put Baby Slice on this too. Which, hey, you know what? That guy will fight on like a week's notice. He really doesn't care. What do you think of them doing that?
I think it's great. I think it's smart. I think it's ingenious. It's one of those things where it's like, let's move some chess pieces around this board without anybody looking, and then they'll notice it afterwards and they'll like it. It's just. I think it could get interesting. It could be, realistically, will it draw viewership? Who knows? I'd probably say no, but the idea is there. Sometimes when you're talking about mixed martial arts promotion, no idea is, well, I shouldn't say that because you look at Japan, but no idea is too far-fetched. But, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do to get those ratings up, and you got to do what you got to do to get people to tune in to your product. So I think it's a great idea.
Back to the current situation at hand. By the way, we may have to cover that Bellator 180 show the day following, as I have an important situation. I also have a wedding to go to during this UFC show, but I think I'm going to make it back in time for that. No worries there.
For Sunday show, you're saying?
Not Sundays. The one, not this weekend, next weekend.
Okay.
The Aldo show. As if that fight will actually happen.
Oh, wow. Don't kill the karma. Oh, my gosh. That's getting me nervous.
There was a guy on Twitter, gosh, I can't remember who it was, the week of Habib Ferguson. He said, there's still 5 days for this fight to fall out, and it did, of course.
No way.
But back to Rory, he beat Paul Daly, and it didn't even look hard. It didn't look hard. He looked like the Rory McDonald. It's so weird to think that he's still 27. He's 27. And I'm just sitting here like, I can't believe UFC let this guy go. But you drop 2 in a row. You got a free agent market in the shape that it's in. I want to know what you thought of Rory's situation, Rory's fight, and you think he's going to be a double champion like he wants to be by the end of the year?
I don't know about the end of the year. It's a weird conundrum in my head whenever I do think of Rory McDonald. First things first, that fight versus Paul Daly. You're a hardcore MMA fan when you're working out in the morning. I had to do a double out this morning. I had to do my weights and my cardio because yesterday was a Canadian holiday. So with the family home, I don't work out when the family's home. So plenty of time to work out.
I didn't have Jimmy Van nagging me yesterday.
There you go. Now you know why. He probably started today. And I'm sitting there just working out, focusing on doing what I got to do, and I just thinking about the Rory McDonald Paul Daly fight, thinking to myself, Paul Daly gave up pretty quick. That choke was potentially tight, but Paul Daly's been around long enough to know when someone's going for your back and to hand fight and to do whatever. Especially if the fight's happening, on your turf. Kind of put up a better fight if you can. Rory was on a mission. I thought Rory's striking was significant. The small amounts of strikes that he did throw just to enter for the takedown and do what he has to do. No point standing and trading with Paul Daly. That's where Paul Daly's strength is. So good on Rory for putting on that performance. I think when you look at the welterweight division and you look at the middleweight division, can Rory McDonald become a 2-division champ? Yeah, I'm sure he can. He's got the skills. He's young. He's got reach. He's got power. He's got speed. He's got
Well, a guy who knows a little bit about competing at middleweight and welterweight, Frank Trigg. You talked to him about the Rory McDonald fight as well.
Yeah, so I asked Frank a bunch of questions, but because he is a former welterweight, he's a UFC Hall of Famer, I said, hey, man, did you get a chance to watch the Rory McDonald fight? And flat out, what did you think? Here's Frank Trigg. Speaking of Canadians, speaking of people that won't be competing in the UFC anytime soon, Rory McDonald is now with Bellator. He returns to action. Emerges victorious versus Paul Daly. Second round submission. Did you have a chance to watch the fight, and what did you think of the fight and Rory's performance?
Well, Rory's ranked fourth for a reason at the weight class. By whatever poll you want to use this week. I mean, it changes, but the Rory's like ranked fourth or whatever, and he's legit, man. He's legit. He had a lot left. I was really surprised that the UFC actually didn't counter, and of course, they could have re-signed him, but Rory had a chance to go out and test the market, and the UFC didn't counter. I don't understand why they didn't counter. I mean, he's such a high-level guy. I don't know why they would let him go. But Rory's over in Bellator, and he comes out for his first fight and destroys. I mean, Paul had a puncher's chance. As long as he keeps on his feet, he's got a shot at winning. He has a shot. It can be late in the fight. It can be final round. Paul still has a puncher's chance of winning. But the reality of it is that the big problem with Paul Daly is that when he gets on the ground, he gets submitted relatively easily. He's got no wrestling ability. He gets held down relatively easily. He gets frustrated very fast. It makes it easier when a guy that knows how to work him on top, and that's exactly what Rory did. Rory made him very frustrated, and then Paul just kind of rolls over and gets his back. It wasn't really a super high technical position from Rory, other than the fact that he pressured him and made him make mistakes. Rory's legit, man, and I think honestly he's gonna get the winner of Lima and Larkin, which raises some interesting things. Larkin's a very interesting matchup for Rory. I don't think Lima's a very interesting matchup for Rory, but he already told him, man, I'm gonna take your belt, I'm gonna take your soul. Like he's gonna try and hurt you. Rory's on a different level again. I think too, he kind of knew that GSP was coming back. And no one's really sure where the weight class was going. So it kind of made sense. It was time for him to have to renegotiate his contract to go move on to Bellator. Because, GSP is going to UFC. UFC's going to do whatever they have to keep him. They're going to let him go fight someplace else if he decides to come back. But Rory, being around GSP, kind of knew this was going to happen. It was the best deal for their friendship, for their training, for the way that they train together. And now, especially for Rory being in Bellator, he has a lot of the pressure taken off him where he's not GSP's training partner. He's not the next GSP coming through. He can kind of be his own guy and be his own man for a while. And he's got a lot of years left, this guy, Rory. It's not like he's going to, win 4, 5, 6 fights, have his contract come up in Bellator and be like, yeah, I'm done. I'm going to retire. This guy's got a lot of years left. So he can easily come back to UFC at the end of this run and go on a good run and come back as the champ. Come back with the belt on his hand and go, look, man, I'm going to go over UFC's going to double my money now. And we all see the money that the UFC has. We all see what the money is being paid out to these guys, these guys at top end. So we know that can happen if they decide to bring Rory back after his contract's up. They can definitely do it. Rory's in a great spot and looks amazing. And honestly, I really see his toughest opponent being being Larkin. If Larkin comes in on top, I thought it was going to be Paul Day, but the way that fight came out, I don't think so as much. Larkin's really going to be his toughest opponent if Larkin gets through Lima, which is not a signed deal, which is not something that could absolutely going to happen. That fight's going to be a war as well. But I think Roy kind of runs through the entire weight class and clean it out a couple times if he chooses to.
Do you think Sunday's UFC event in Sweden with Alexander Gustafsson and Glover Teixeira in the main event, you think that fight is going to be a war? And the reason why I ask is these two guys now have an opportunity, especially Alexander. I guess you could say Glover as well. I had a chance to run into Anthony Johnson very, very briefly over in Florida when I was doing Titan FC, and he came by to say hi to Kamaru, Usman, and I as we were doing the broadcast. So I couldn't stop in the middle of the broadcast and talk to Anthony Johnson. I wanted to catch up with him after the event, but he obviously had to leave. So I did see him, but he's no longer in the UFC's light heavyweight division, which opens up the door for every single contender to take that one step up. And come Sunday, Alexander Gustafsson in Sweden, who I think has all the pressure in this fight, is taking on Glover Teixeira, who's obviously a little older. What do you foresee in that fight?
First, great job on the Titan broadcast. I watched it on Fight Pass. It was awesome. You and Kamaru were doing a great job. I really,
thank you, sir.
It was really neat to. I haven't listened in a while. Usually, I watch with all the volume down, so I can watch the fights and act like a ref. So I don't get opinionated by the commentators. I was like, I'm just gonna sit and drink a beer and listen to Joe and what they do. And you guys did a great job. Great job. I do think that Alexander has all the pressure on him. I do think that he's got a lot of heat on him in this one. He's got to be the next guy. Now that Anthony's out, he's like trying to prove that he's the next guy. Glover Teixeira is older, but still viable. Still has a lot of heat left in those guns of his. He still has a lot of fist power. This one, I don't think there's gonna be much of a war though. Just because I think Gustafsson is got so much more to prove, he won't get into a war. Does it make sense? I don't see him wanting to get into a war when he's got to make sure he wins. I think it's going to be a lot safer. He's going to play a little bit more conservative because of all the pressure. He's going to do just enough to win every round. Unless he finds, and this is always my unless clause, unless he finds that he can hurt Glover early, then he'll keep the pressure on, looking for the end. But if he feels like, wow, I might be in damage, I might get in trouble here, I might be getting hurt here, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I stick with this as easily and best as possible. So it'll be like a slower fight. But it's going to be a war just because Glover Teixeira doesn't know how to do anything else but be in a war. The man loves to come. He loves to fight. He really loves to fight. He enjoys. I don't want to say he enjoys being hit, but he enjoys the option of trying not to get hit. He enjoys the ability of having to defend and not get tagged and defend takedowns and use top game. Like he really does love it. Like it's really part of his DNA. So he doesn't know anything else but to be in a war. So if Gustafsson allows him to be in a war, then it's going to be a war. But I don't think Gustafsson will. I think he'll be smart and try to win it. Try to win every round to win the fight.
Now, Joe, before you and I get into UFC Sweden, there were a couple of things that I definitely wanted your opinions on because you and Trigg talked about UFC Sweden at the end of that clip. Vitor Belfort says he's going to fight after UFC 212. So, one, this is stupid. He has no leverage now. He has no leverage when negotiating because he's going to Bellator. I think he said, "Sup, I'm going to Bellator." And yeah, to just come out and say that, like, didn't he say he was going to retire?
He said he wanted one more fight. And we know Elias Theodoro put his hand up there. Nate Marquardt got the fight. He said, I just want to fight one more time. He said he wanted the League of Legends or Legends League and stuff like that. And, it's just another one of those guys. How do you say this? Like, they say one thing and you believe it, but knowing them long enough, you realize that's not going to happen. That's not the truth. There's so much more that could potentially happen here. It's another. Again, I really hope he saved his money because he's made a boatload of money, if I'm not mistaken. And you don't need to fight anymore. I know there's competition, but there's other things that you can do to compete. Now, what did he get reinvigorated because he went to TriStar and he starts training with Faraz and everybody? In general, that he thinks that, you know what?
Oh, I think we know how he's going to get reinvigorated when that USADA testing is gone.
So it begs the question, Sean. Let's just throw a what if up there. What if he does, His contract is done with the UFC. They have no interest in matching whatever Bellator may have to offer. Let's just go with this hypothetical. Let's drive down the path here, okay? What happens if he does sign with Bellator? They make an announcement he's fighting Vanderlei Silva or Chael Sonnen or whomever, and then we see him show up at the weigh-ins just ripped, jacked, and huge. How bad would that look for Bellator?
It would look really bad, and we would all know the score. Another thing, I don't know if it looked bad for Bellator or not, but Paul Daly MVP, they got to fight.
At this point, yeah. What was the deal? So Daly came out. Did Paige say something? Daly responded, and just the altercation happened?
Well, I mean, Daly called him a pussy about 74 times in the cage, and I'm sure MVP took exception, and they had a little bit of a brawl. To me, would be a smart matchup because Paul Daly is a striker. Although MVP says that if they fight, Paul Daly's going to turn into a wrestler. We've heard that line a lot. But then again, not a lot of people have striking in the manner that MVP does. Like, his striking is not only just good, but it's tough to handle because you don't see it a lot.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So that's what I'm interested in. But UFC Sweden, also known as UFC, I'm familiar with these guys' names, but I can't remember any of their fights.
Oh, I can't believe you said that. Wait. Sorry. Can I ask you one question regarding Bellator before we move on to the Sweden card?
Yeah.
Give me one reason why Bellator should not put that fight on.
MVP and Daly? I don't have a reason. They should do it, but maybe because MVP's been pulling out of fights a little bit often for my liking lately. But
I don't think he'd pull out of that fight unless it's a serious injury. You got to fight. You got to fight Daly because that's a good
main
name.
event. That's a main event too.
It's huge. Yeah, I like it. I'm gonna say it's not huge. It's definitely great for Bellator.
I think it would do the 12,000 they did in London. I think it would do 12,000 in London again. Yeah,
I can see it. All right, sorry. Go ahead, Sweden.
UFC Sweden. So, in doing my research for this, Joe, did you know that Volkan Ozdemir is the number 5 ranked light heavyweight in the UFC? He's had one fight in the UFC.
Yeah.
He is ranked above his opponent, Misha Serkinov, who is 4-0 in the UFC.
So, again, we can go back to these rankings, Sean, and they're extremely subjective. But when the overall consensus of the people that are voting in are that subjective to the point where Volkan Ozdemir is the number 5 light heavyweight in the UFC, is that not just a case of what versus what? No, like it's just it makes no sense to me because I love Volkan, great guy. I met him at Titan. He was supposed to fight for us. He was in the booth with us one time with Kamaru and I, but no. I respectfully disagree. I mean, the rankings gimmick continues.
It does. Either way, I think that fight will be good. That's a hell of a fight to add to that. And once you get beyond that in the main event, it's like, well, okay. I would wager that 60% of the rest of the card are coming off of losses. Ben Saunders versus Peter Sabata. I'm sure it'll be a good one.
That'll be a good fight.
Razak Al Hassan. I think that he's somebody to kind of watch for, but he's facing a guy at Omari Akhmedov who may be fighting for his job. Now, here's the thing when people are fighting for their jobs. Usually, they play it really, really, really safe. That's what I've noticed. In some rare occasions, of course, there's always an exception to the rule. Jake Ellenberger, for example. But you have Nordine Talib, who is probably also fighting for his job. You've got those two fights back to back, and they're welterweight fights, which generally go the distance anyway. I don't know. I'm not pumped for this show. I'm not like looking forward to this show. I'm looking forward to about 3 or whenever the hell the last 2 fights come on, those 2 light heavyweight fights, because this will be a morning and afternoon show, which I'm also down for. Thumbs up. I'm all for morning and early afternoon MMA. But even straight down to the prelims, you got Marcin Held fighting for his job, and that seems to be a trend here.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Camozzi's on the prelim card as well. I mean, there's some fights that I really enjoy here. I'm looking at this. Sorry, everyone, if I'm looking to the bottom right. That's where I've got my fights here. I like some of these fights. I think they're going to be very enjoyable. Main event, co-main event for sure. I like the Ben Saunders Sabata fight. I really do. The only problem is this is another case where, Sean, like there's just too many fighters, too many events, watered down. This is not the UFC to me. This is never going to be the Super Bowl of MMA. This is not a card that screams viewership. This is not a card that says, "Woohoo! I can't wait to Sunday afternoon to watch the UFC on television." This doesn't scream that at all. I just harken back to when it used to be good to watch. We used to be so excited to watch a UFC event. Look how crazy we went for UFC 211. Man, there was a lapse. There was 3 weeks off, and we were just they stacked that card. We were really looking forward to seeing what was going to happen there. And then it's just, I don't know what needs to be done here. But this is a card here I'm going to watch. I have no choice, to be honest with you. We got to talk about it afterwards. I love fighting, but these are guys that are, I don't even know if they're headliners on grassroots shows.
To me,
they're fighting on a UFC card.
To me, you put a title fight or a contender fight as a main event. You got a top 5 fight as a co-main event, worst case scenario. Then the rest of that card should be either filled with names that are going to capture Vitor Belfort. Even if he's not ranked, you can throw him on like the 3rd, 4th, or 5th fight, or top 15 fights. And then you got to have something nice for the prelim main event, but not here because it's Fight Pass. So you don't have to worry about that. But then you fill up the rest of the card with Oliver Enkamp versus Nordine Taleb, Jack Hermanson against Alex Nicholson. Man, that's rough. That's rough, man.
Yeah. I mean, I get it's happening in Sweden. My God, is there a lot of pressure on Alexander Gustafsson to win this fight? If there was ever
Pedro Munoz versus Stasiak could be good, though. Because Munoz has had a couple of really good fights back-to-back, and Stasiak's won 2 in a row. So I think that I would have put that on the show, on the main card, over a couple of the fights that were on there. But, I mean, well, it's not Fight Pass, sorry. I guess it's airing on Fox Sports 1.
That Fox Sports 1 card, or bouts, are almost better than the main card.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just looking at it.
With the exception of those top 2 fights, and maybe Sabata Sanders, because Sabata Sanders could be good.
Yeah.
It could be good, or it could be ass-tastic. Who knows? I thought this was going to air on Fight Pass. I had no idea this was airing on Fox Sports 1. What do I know?
Yeah. And then you still, I mean, there's like 3,000 fights on this card. It's just crazy. 6 on the main card, 4 on Fox, 2 on Fight Pass, 12 fights. What time is this happening? Eastern time, like 9 a.m.?
10 a.m. Eastern. The FS1 prelim started at 11 a.m. Eastern, and then the main card starts at 1 p.m. So I would wager that we will go live probably about 4:35-ish.
It's going to be a long day.
Yeah. I prefer afternoon MMA to getting done with work at 4 a.m.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm completely on your side, but then it goes back to the article I put on Fightful.com about these UFC events are simply too long. They're too long, but, other media covering other sports have to endure the same thing, despite their sport being 3 hours long and ours being 6 hours and 42 minutes on average.
Yeah, we did not need that first hour on Fight Pass. They could have split up the FS1 prelims and started this whole thing at 11 a.m., just chopped a little bit of it off. 5 main card fights is all we need. We don't need 6. You do an hour on Fight Pass, an hour of prelims.
You know what this is? This is the UFC putting together a fight card with X amount of bouts, and some are going to fall off.
Yeah.
But they end up all staying, and they're like, well, okay.
That's another thing I see on the amateur circuit, because everybody decides they don't want to be a fighter the week of the fight. So my boy Billy Donovan, sometimes he'll have to book upwards of 20 fights, especially with the new rules that you have to have in Kentucky. You have to have your card finalized 15 days before the event for an amateur event. Could you imagine?
That's impossible.
So, and it was funny because there was one time where he booked 23 fights, and all of them stayed.
Oh, poor guy. Yeah.
Fortunately for him, Amateur MMA, it's a 1 minute knockout or it's a 3-round decision.
Yeah.
There were like 15 finishes on that show, so he was just running them out one after the other. Like the pacing was great.
Yeah, it's lucky, good for him. But I mean, I gave props to Lex McMahon, the Titan FC COO, during the broadcast on Fight Pass on Friday, because what that guy has to go through to keep that card alive by the time it gets to broadcast. There's so many changes. I mean, there was a YouTube video that Titan put out, a feature Way of the Warrior with DeMarcus Jackson. It was DeMarcus Jackson. Yeah, it was DeMarcus Jackson. Like, I mean, while they were filming the video, he'd already gone through his third opponent change. And he's just like, it's the old adage, one that I've always had a hard time believing, but forget about what your opponent's going to do to you. You need to focus on what you are going to do to your opponent. And that's a case where it's so true, because you don't know who your opponent's going to be when you're fighting below the UFC. And Titan FC has launched a lot of guys into the UFC, but you take a look at poor DeMarcus, who I'm sure is anyways. It wasn't easy. You train. And, Henry Hooft like, just focus on what we need to do. Here's what you're going to do. But at the same time, Sean, when you're fighting a specific opponent, you have to look for trends. You have to look for strategies. You have to look at what they fall back on when they get in trouble. And, it just goes to show you that it's hard putting on these cards. And I think this is a case where the UFC said, yeah, we'll book all these fights. Bunch are going to fall out. And we'll have a perfectly fine situation. Oops. They all stayed on.
For the fights themselves, the two big ones. Really the only ones worth breaking down. Although, like I said, Munoz-Stasiak will be good. And we'll break them all down after they happen. We got Ozdemir and Serkinov. Normally I'd be like, man, this is a great opportunity for Ozdemir. But apparently it's a great opportunity for Misha Serkinov to be fighting the number 5 ranked light heavyweight in the world. They're about equal in experience, although Misha Serkinov has more high-level experience. I can't pretend like I know as much about Ozdemir as I do about other light heavyweights, but this fight could launch somebody. Well,
it has to, right?
Yeah.
It has to, because this division right now is thin. It's thin right across the top 15. It is thin. Other than, especially with AJ leaving now, it just got thinner. So
Antigulov is a top 15 guy now.
Right? So this is a huge fight for both guys. Volkan, obviously, first things first, Sean, I think this is going 15 minutes. This is going the decision. I don't think either guy is going to finish the other one. I will be pleasantly surprised if there's a finish in this fight. Despite the fact both guys are solid fighters, I think they're going to neutralize each other. I don't have a bias in this one. As much as I love Misha, he's a Canadian or lives in Canada, lives in Toronto. Love the guy. I like Volkan just as much because Volkan's just a class guy, and they both bring it. They both bring it to the cage, and they both put on a good fight. They both look for finishes. They're both going to get tested big time in this fight. And it's just a matter of, if there's going to be a finish, it's the guy that's going to have a bigger heart, obviously, and who can break the other guy down. I just don't think either guy can be broken down. I think it goes 15 minutes, and it could go either way. For Volkan, if he emerges victorious, he's now 2-0 in the UFC. Still doesn't deserve to be number 5, but with the way this division is, that wouldn't surprise me. There'll be some eyebrows for people that are actually going to watch this. There'll be some eyebrows raised. Hey, this guy's legit. He's taken out OSP and he's taken out Misha Serkinov. Now, if Misha Serkinov emerges victorious, he continues his run at 205 pounds. He already called out Shogun once. He had the big, huge contract squabble that people were paying more attention to that contract squabble than they were for his fights. And now he's back in there. He takes out the number 5 guy. People are going to be paying attention to Misha. Again, it's a division that isn't very strong right now. The depth isn't there, and he's going to move up. Arguably, he should be number 5 after this fight if he emerges victorious.
Yeah, and if I'm the UFC, because you got 2 of the maybe 5 recognizable, or there are 6 recognizable, really, maybe light heavyweights. You got Rogerio Nogueira, but he ain't ever fighting. That dude never fights. He's pulled out of 6 fights and actually fought like 9 since he's been in the UFC. At some point, you're going to have to stop matching up Glover Teixeira and Gustafsson, and you'll have to have like Glover Teixeira against Serkinov, and Ozdemir against Gustafsson, and hope that they can make some names off of these or something, because you got this unfortunate here. It's a lot like the prime of the light heavyweight division, only it's not the prime of the light heavyweight division, where there was that carousel of guys who kept fighting each other and fighting each other. That's what we're seeing now with Cormier, Jones, Gustafsson, Teixeira, Manoa, and maybe even Shogun thrown in the mix here soon. But it's just not as high level because it doesn't seem like anybody's really emerging. Or at least there's not that one name that is just like emerging hellaciously. I think Serkinov could be that guy though. But we got Tyson Pedro, Patrick Cummins, Jean Vellante, Blachowicz, and Antigulov in the top 15. That's iffy. Then we got this main event, Teixeira, Gustafsson. If Gustafsson can, my thing with Gustafsson is he's 30. But he has such trouble staying in the cage. And it's been this way for a long time. Like he's never fought more than twice a year since like I think 2011, and the last few years it's been more like once every 10, 11, 12 months. But I want to know how you see this Teixeira Gustafsson fight going.
I'm leaning towards Alexander Gustafsson. Just in terms of reach and the fact that so many people are sleeping on him. They've underrated him because of his losses. When you take a look at who he's lost to, he's lost only to the very, very best in this division.
Does the 2 wins in 4.5 years concern you?
Nope. 0. You look at those performances other than the Rumble performance, and he shows you that this guy is an elite mixed martial artist. He is arguably one of the best. Well, he is one of the best in this division, in my opinion. I'm not concerned about the fact that he hasn't won much in the past few years. The fact of the matter is, look at the competition. He gave John Jones the toughest fight he's ever had. He went the distance with Daniel Cormier. He got his bell rung versus Anthony Rumble Johnson. And realistically speaking, unless your name is Daniel Cormier, who else hasn't done that? I mean, when Daniel, unless AJ, who, by the way, lots of love to AJ. I saw him. He came to say hi to us at Titan FC, looking all slick with his nice, what's the hat? What are those hats? Those little hats, what they called? Whatever. Anyways, love my Rumble. He's just a great dude. But yeah, I think Alexander, not the man in this division, but so underrated, underappreciated. Chicano hat. That's what I was looking for.
Gosh.
Yes, he looked gangster with the white, the blue thing, the ribbon or the black ribbon. But I think Glover's going to give him a fight. I just don't think he's going to win. I don't know if this one's going to go the distance, to be honest with you. But I don't know if Alexander can finish.
I didn't
Glover.
think the Blachowicz one would either, though, and I didn't think Teixeira versus Cannonier would either. But every fight's a different story. It really is.
Styles make sense.
Teixeira's won 4 of his last 5, but I thought that Anthony Johnson knockout was going to be a life changer. One of those that you just don't recover from. The thing about me with Gustafsson, I know he's got all the talent in the world. My question is, after the kind of fight he had with John Jones, one of the greatest light heavyweight fights of all time, getting obliterated by Anthony Johnson, going the distance with Daniel Cormier in another one of the greatest fights in light heavyweight history, he went to 3 rounds in September, and he took some time off. I wonder how many miles his MMA body has on him. The cage miles, because he's been fighting since 2007. That's what I wonder. Now Teixeira's got plenty of cage miles on him as well, but I feel like, for years, he was just knocking people out in the first round.
I think Teixeira's got more mileage on his body than Alexander does.
Well, yeah, he's got 31 fights, and then
that's what I'm saying, right? It's just
but I wonder how Gustafsson will be moving forward long term, because when he fought Jones, I was thinking, wow, this is a guy that we're going to see for the next, 10 years maybe, at a fairly high level. Now, when I've watched him recently, I'm like, he's still at a high level, but I wonder how many more years he'll be at a high level, even though he's only 30.
Don't be surprised if Alexander wins this fight and quietly gets a title shot afterwards, because John Jones and DC are going to fight. John Jones hypothetically defeats DC. He needs a challenger. The one guy you do want to see him fight isn't necessarily Jimmy Manuwa, because that's who DC would likely fight next. You want to see that rematch with Alexander Gustafsson after what happened in Toronto.
Yep. Well, we will be here right after the show on Sunday. I'm so happy it's not a Saturday show. I am so happy it's an afternoon show. We're going to bring you all the coverage. Of course, visit Fightful.com, all your MMA, boxing, and wrestling news, coverage, results, photos, videos, podcasts, interviews. We have some live boxing coverage this Saturday. We have had podcasts the last 4 days, from NXT TakeOver to WWE Backlash to Raw, tonight SmackDown, tomorrow The List, and ya boy, we got exclusive interviews coming to Fightful.com. We've got Most Ridiculous with Anna Bauer. If you just check out the podcast and not the actual site, go there, because we like to bring you stuff that you can't get anywhere else, that you can't find anywhere else. That's what we strive to do at Fightful. Also, the forums. The forums are up and rocking. I love how active you guys have been in those. Submit questions, ideas for podcasts. Really talk about anything. Like MMA, boxing, wrestling, movies, entertainment, music, TV, action figures, video games. We have forums for about everything. If we don't have a forum for something and there's enough demand, we'll add it. We want you all to come there. We want it to be your hangout. Always fun.
And don't forget, I'll be submitting videos, 1 to 2 minute video every week at Fightful. Just me sounding off on whatever is coming up, or what has just happened, or what potentially can
My hair.
take place. Yes, Sean's mop, or whatever you want to call that thing. Is that a mop?
Look at that. Look at that.
That's embarrassing for a human being.
Embarrassing for you that you can't grow it.
That's not embarrassing. I can't grow it. It is what it is, right?
Look at it.
But yes, I'll have a video up later on this week. I'll have an article posted tomorrow to discuss a variety of things. I'm always taking feedback, guys. I'm always taking suggestions. And girls, by all means, at Showdown Joe on social media, hit me up. If there's something you want to talk about, I will give my thoughts on a variety of things we probably spoke about today in the video later this week. But we all know what happens in the world of mixed martial arts between now and the 48 hours of when I'm going to post that video. Things can change, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, Sean, I'll leave it up to you to close off the show.
Guys, as always, thank you so much. We really appreciate the support. We're still a relatively new site, so come and hang out in those live coverage and discussions. I think I'm going to start creating forum threads for events. And if that picks up traction, we'll keep doing that. Just, support the site. Go visit those forums. Subscribe to us, iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube. Leave us a thumbs up on YouTube. And, of course, also leave us nice reviews on iTunes and Stitcher. That stuff helps, too. But thank you, guys. Until next time, we're out.